Buenos dias. Shalom. Ni hao. Ohayo gozaimasu. Bonjour. Good morning, Downstate. Thank you for coming out to our 5th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Program Award. We're delighted to be hosting it for the 5th consecutive year. Every year I start off by reminiscing a little bit about how I grew up in Mississippi and how the civil rights movement, my family was part of it down there, what my mother and father did. And so today I wanted to start out with a brief little story, and because you never know how your timeline affects you. We all think that that things are unset, that we don't know what we're put on earth here to do, and things just sort of happen. But when you get old enough and you're able to go back and look at your timeline and you see how things have dropped in your timeline, you sort of get a glimpse. If you don't know for certain, at least, you sort of get a glimpse of the things that you're supposed to be doing, or that track that you're supposed to be on. So let me just share this story with you. Of course, you know, we're a military family. My dad was in the Army and Air Force, in the Army during World War II, and then later on switched over to the Air Force. He was, at the end of World War II, he went back to college at Alcorn A&M in Mississippi to play football. Now that football team had a lot of people that would become famous during the Civil Rights Movement later on. Both Charles and Medgar Evers were on the football team. And you don't know him too much here, but a guy by the name of Aaron Henry, who was a big pioneer in Mississippi in civil rights, was on that football team. But anyway, in my dad's last assignment, we basically grew up on the air bases of Japan and upstate New York. And in the last years of his career, he decided that he would retire back in Mississippi, where he was from. He said that all of his kids, we were too high-strung to go live in a big city because we had no knowledge of segregation. We lived in Japan for a long time. He was part of the occupying force after World War II, and we stayed there a long time. So we moved back to Mississippi, and my older brothers, I talk a lot about my second oldest brother, Greg. That was the one my dad, with my other siblings, sent up to the high school to integrate it. But before he did that, when we were still going to the all-segregated elementary school, Greg was kind of a daredevil. He's always in trouble. He spent an equal amount of time in the principal's office at the black school as he did at the principal's office when he integrated the school at the white school. He's just one of those kind of guys. But one day, a neighbor's house caught on fire. And we don't know today if the reason for the fire department was not to go into the house to rescue the lady. It was a good friend of my mother's, because the fire was just too out of control and it wasn't worth the risk of going in there, or because it was on the other side of the tracks. We don't know today what the reason was, why they didn't go in to rescue her. But my brother Greg did. He was 15 years old. He kicked in the door, went in and brought Miss Creola out and set her on the steps. She eventually died 2 days later from smoke inhalation and all the burns that she had on her body. But my dad took my brother to the closest hospital he could take him to at that time, was Gulfport Memorial Hospital. We didn't have any black hospitals in Mississippi, but we had segregation within the hospitals that was there. And my dad was still in the service at the time. So he's a master sergeant. He walks his son into the hospital. He tells him what's going on. And he said for 20 minutes, my brother just laid on the cot, coughing. No one came to see him. No one came to ask anything. So he finally, and you know, we say thank God for the military base, he picked him up, put him in the car, drove another 20 miles to the Air Force base where we lived at, and brought him to the hospital there, and they treated him right away. I say that to say now because I look at my timeline. These are the things that we're talking about today. This is the kind of work that I'm engaged in today. So that incident, to me, just didn't happen by happenstance. You know, that's part of my timeline. I'm able to reflect back on that from a personal standpoint to see that in 2016, there are still some things that were going on in the prior century that are unresolved. And one of the things that I think that as we move toward remedies with unequal health in America and health disparities is that we look for other models. One of the things that I always admired about what President Kennedy used to say, I'm not young enough to remember him a lot, but when I go back and read, is that there can't be an American solution for all the ills of the world. Some countries are just not ready for the things that we are doing. And in the same sense, we don't have all the answers. So I think that as we start looking at things that the World Health Organization talks about, the social determinants of health, things that affect people in their everyday lives, where they live, what kind of transportation they have, what food do they have access to, how they age. If those things are important with respect to contributing to the kind of health that they're in, then those are the things that we should also be looking at when we're trying to come up with solutions to their healthcare problems. These are the things that the World Health Organization deems very relevant when we're looking at the clinical diagnosis and prognosis of how we take care of our patients here. And with the changing demographics in the United States, it is projected in recent years, in about 40, 45 years, that the current underrepresented populations will be the majority populations. But that's not trickling over into the healthcare workforce. So what that calls for is a greater effort at the healthcare workforce to start mirroring the population that is going to be taken care of. That's not to say that we don't have those numbers in our general population, but we don't have them in our healthcare workforce right now. So I think these are the things that lie ahead that we have to continue to work on. We're doing some of that training here at Downstate. We have the Brooklyn's Health Disparities Department. We have a lot of professors engaged in this kind of work. Even here at Downstate, our office partners with University Hospital of Brooklyn to do the cultural competency training. But that needs to continue across the United States, because what we're going to have if we don't continue to do this, I'm fine. If we don't continue to do this, we'll have a population not trained in providing cultural sensitive health care to a population that desperately needs it. So at this time, I am glad to introduce a good friend of mine who's going to bring greetings from Suny Systems. Dr. Carlos Medina is the Vice Chancellor for the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity at the systems level. Dr. Medina is a good friend of mine. He's recently elected to the Board of Trustees of the National Association of Diversity Officers. He's one of the, at the national level, he is the only Chief Diversity Officer over a state system at the national level. And so we're glad that it is in New York State that he's here and that we have him here. So at this time, I'll ask Dr. Carlos Medina to come up, the Vice Chancellor for Suny Systems.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Buenos dias. I'm not sure that I can say it in as many languages as Kevin did earlier, so I'm going to stop there. But, it's really a pleasure for me to be here this morning. I came from Albany, but let me say I was born in Kings County Hospital, and I'm very proud of that. And I grew up in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, in the 1960s. And every time that I tell someone that I'm from Williamsburg, Brooklyn, they say, "Have you been there lately?" Well, yes, I have. And I can tell you firsthand that the Williamsburg, Brooklyn of today, it is not the Williamsburg, Brooklyn of the 60s where I grew up. And so I don't think you could even sell homes back in the 60s. Nobody wanted to buy it in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. But today, if you choose to live in that community, there's a serious question about affordability, right? Because it's just so incredibly expensive. So it's nice to be in Brooklyn. Okay? So I want to just take a second, and I'm hoping that you'll join me in applauding Kevin because he's really doing some great work. Kevin. So thank you for all the diversity work and inclusion work that you do right down here in Downstate. So I am truly honored to be here today in celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy. And so on behalf of Chairman H. Carl McCall, Chancellor Nancy Zimpher, and all of Suny, once again, welcome. In honoring Martin Luther King, it is important to recognize how civic engagement and community service have contributed to the progress we have made relative to civil rights and tolerance throughout our communities, our state, and nationally. It has been over 50 years since King's supporters gathered at the March on Washington, where the resonance of King's voice and message created a spirit of possibility, acting on a dream for equality. And yet, I'm reminded that while we celebrate Dr. King's legacy, in my heart, I feel that in some ways, his dream has not been fully realized. We need to continue to encourage people from all walks of life to come together to solve our most pressing national issues, two of which are education and, of course, health disparities for our most underserved populations. Suny, the State University of New York, continues to acknowledge the importance of diversity. For example, as a chancellor's initiative and charge, the university has recently adopted a sweeping diversity, equity, and inclusion policy that will help Suny become the most inclusive system of higher education in the country by ensuring more diverse representation and equity for students, faculty, and staff throughout the entire system. And for those of you who may not be as knowledgeable about Suny, I doubt it, I think everybody here is, we are the largest comprehensive system of higher education in the country. We have 64 campuses, almost 90,000 employees, and 500,000 students. That is really saying something. And so I'm also pleased to mention one more time that Kevin Antoine was one of the highly talented committee members on our task force that helped create the policy that I just referred to. Not only are we evaluating how far we have come in terms of access and inclusion, we are pressing forward by recommending actions that will help transform the university's culture and the way diversity initiatives are viewed throughout the system. Here at Downstate Medical, you are in the midst of one of New York City's most diverse communities. The civil rights of one group also impacts all the others, whether we are providing equity for employment, programs for professional development, or cross-cultural competencies for patient care. Downstate recognizes this challenge and has led many educational programs to build cultural competencies through healthcare education initiatives. It is as though Dr. King's resounding question, "What are you doing for others?" is in the hearts of everyone who serves this community out of this institution. In closing, let me say that as SUNY's Chief Diversity Officer, I'm very passionate and fully committed to advancing diversity and inclusive excellence throughout the university, as well as doing all I can to hold it accountable. For it is a critical part of the mission, all the way back to 1948 when SUNY was created. So as we all look to make the world a better place, I leave you with the words of Dr. King, who once said, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward." And we are. Thank you.
Want to again thanks Dr. Medina for those words of inspiration and hope. And he mentioned some of the things that I'm involved in, but I can't take all the credit for that because I have a great staff that steers me where I need to be. And part of that staff includes Shondell Goldsmith, who's the real lawyer in the office. Lorraine Brooks, who recently retired but was instrumental in providing all the employee assistance program services here for Downstate. I also just want to give a quick shout out to Dr. Duffus from the CDC. With all the things going on in the world right now, with all the new diseases that come out every day, I mean, it's just, I am humbled, to have him accept our offer to come up here and speak at Downstate and to sort of put us, hopefully, maybe, in the mix of some of the things that are going on down there. So I really want to thank Dr. Wayne Duffus for accepting our invitation. So at this time, I'll call up our Assistant Vice President for Government Affairs and Community Engagement.
Good morning, everyone. We are very privileged today to have with us the Deputy Borough President, Diana Reyna, who will give us some brief remarks on Martin Luther King Day and what his leadership meant. And I want to give you a little bit of background on her. Deputy Borough President Diana Reyna has spent 12 years on the New York City Council. She is presently the Deputy Borough President, and she has been in that office since 2014. And a little bit more background about her. As the first woman of Dominican descent elected to the office of in New York State, she focuses on ways that she can advance and advocate for over 2.6 million residents of New York City's most diverse borough. Reyna supports innovation and high-tech job creation, investing in women or minority-owned businesses, as well as businesses, incubators that facilitate the critical work of entrepreneurs in creating startup companies. She focuses on knocking down barriers in the path of women and men who are hoping to take a chance and follow a dream. Daily, Reyna envisions new and bold ways to tackle Brooklyn's inequities. She is a tireless advocate for the BQ Green Project, which will deck the part of Brooklyn Queens Expressway that bisects the south side of Williamsburg, as was mentioned by Dr. Medina, with a park that bridges the community and improves the open space ration, bolster local businesses, and improve quality of life in northern Brooklyn for thousands of residents. Reyna believes that Brooklyn has many great success stories and is at the forefront of culture, education, and the arts and diversity. She says that Brooklyn has become a terrific global brand, but it is so much more than that. Brooklyn holds our future, our children, our neighbors, our artists, our entrepreneurs, our schools, and our businesses. And she is inspired and excited to champion the causes of Brooklyn. So, that said, what it means is that she is a dynamic legislator, and she also does a mean merengue. But without further ado, I'd like to bring to the podium Deputy Borough President Diana Reyna.
Good morning to everyone. Good morning. I'll spare you a merengue today. My name is Diana Reyna, and I am the Deputy Borough President alongside serving Brooklyn for you with our Borough President, Eric L. Adams, and he sends his greetings. We are proud to serve 2.6 million people, a dynamic borough of what is 46% of families who speak a language other than English at home. That is a remarkable gesture of who we are today versus the days of Martin Luther King Jr. As I stand here before you, I would be remiss not to give greetings to Dr. Williams, although he is not here today, President Williams. We want to make sure that we are able to lend support wherever possible. As I look around the room, just making sure that we continue to press upon you that you are not alone as Suny Downstate. Borough President Adams and I constantly on the phone with Suny, Mr. McCall, who has the opportunities to make sure that our only medical institution in Brooklyn remains open. And that is the legacy that speaks true to what Dr. King's message was to all of us. And it is all of our job to maintain that message. I want to just remind us that when we talk about Suny Downstate, we shouldn't forget the history that this great institution is responsible for. This is the home of where the first MRI, correct me if I'm wrong, was invented. That story isn't told. For what reason, I don't know. That film, that documentary, that book should include those historical timelines. Nobel Peace Prize winners came out of this institution. Those are the stories of the men and women we should be talking about, that are relative today as they were in their time. This is the home of where Viagra was invented. And if no one knows the brand, then they're dead. Where are the royalty fees to this institution to keep it resilient as the only medical institution in Brooklyn? Royalty fees, let us learn from Shark Tank, are the way to live. And this institution deserves those royalty fees from so many making millions and billions of dollars on the invention of that one small pill out of this institution. Let us not forget, after today, we must demand royalty fees for this institution, for every intellectual property it develops from here on then. That is the message of today. I say that with no reservation. I am unapologetic, coming from Williamsburg, Dr. Medina. Born and raised, parents who came from the Dominican Republic here, in a time when it was tumultuous to come here, but even more so in the Dominican Republic under a dictatorship from my mother, single, in her 30s. To be able to come here and understand no English, but survive and understanding that she had freedom, that she can fight a better life here than back home, not just for herself, but for her 8 brothers and sisters and her mother, who was raising all of them alone, after having lost her dad when she was only 12 years old. And so it is important that we all understand Dr. King's message. Dr. King called for equity. Equity for all when it comes to health, education, justice, human rights, and welfare. Without it, our experiment called the United States would fail. People across the United States have honored Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but let's not forget the journey and legacy. To me, Dr. King represents a journey of great importance and significance that we have inherited and strive for each and every day. We know that Dr. King's dream is unfinished. His legacy is what we try to live up to. I am not afraid are the words he used. I too am not afraid. Are you? Can you stand before each other and say you are not afraid? I will not be satisfied are the words that he continuously expressed. I am not satisfied until we see a better Brooklyn. Are you satisfied? We cannot be satisfied. We cannot be afraid. Today, as we reflect on the road ahead of us, I am reflecting on his words. We must learn to live together as brothers and sisters or we are going to perish together. We live in challenging times as a city. We are surrounded by beautiful diversity in Brooklyn, where 47% of us speak a language other than English at home. In Martin Luther King Jr.'s name, we must remember our core values as Americans and as decent human beings. We are a nation of diversity, the sum of peoples from all over the world. Let us be king-like and embrace who we are. Dr. King knew that our diversity is our strength. That continues to be more so today than ever before. Let us embrace who we all are in the year ahead. Embrace the diversity we share. The 2016 recipient of Downstate Medical Center's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Award is the CDC's Office of Health Equity's National Center for HIV/AIDS, Viral Hepatitis, STD, and TB Prevention. Dr. Wayne Duffus, Associate Director of Health Equity and Director of the National Center for HIV/AIDS, Viral Hepatitis, STD, and TB Prevention, who will accept this award and give his keynote address. Dr. Duffus, I'd like to present to you this citation on behalf of Borough President Eric L. Adams and myself. And I'd like to read, whereas it is a time-honored Brooklyn tradition to recognize those individuals and organizations which demonstrate an outstanding commitment to promoting excellence and provide outstanding services and support to local residents and those in need in the healthcare field, it is therefore fitting that we join together in acknowledgement of their special events and occasions. Whereas on behalf of all Brooklynites, joining today with medical professionals, supporters, and friends of Suny Downstate Medical Center to recognize and honor Dr. Wayne A. Duffus for his dedication and outstanding contributions to ensuring that the Borough of Brooklyn has healthy communities, placing the patient, the person, first. Whereas on behalf of all Brooklynites, we salute Dr. Duffus, a graduate of the Albert Einstein College of Medicine with an MD and PhD in virology, now you're gonna help me, virology, cell biology, and Associate Director of Health Equity at CDC's National Center for HIV, Viral Hepatitis, STD, and TB Prevention, for his exemplary leadership role in promoting health equity across the National Center for HIV, Viral Hepatitis, STD, and TB Prevention by increasing collaboration and advancing scientific agenda across the center. I applaud him for his previous service as a CDC EIS officer from 2002 to 2004 in Columbia, South Carolina. I commend him for publishing 70 professional papers and being involved in numerous public health projects. I appreciate Wayne Duffus, MD, for making a positive impact in the lives of others, and I thank him for all that he has done to touch and improve the lives of many while helping to move and shape our communities forward as one Brooklyn, as Dr. King's legacy. Now therefore, Eric L. Adams do hereby confers this citation upon you, Dr. Duffus. Please accept this award. Please come and join.